Hey there! Here is a little homemade video to empower you during this time. There's so much happening. I think it's really important to be grounded in good information and to surround yourself with items and techniques that will work. So I'm not a doctor. I'm not a researcher. I'm not an immunologist. I'm not an expert in coronavirus in any way. I'm a folk herbalist. And when all of this information started to come out, what I did is I did a lot of research and talked to a bunch of doctors, and I went and I got the herbs that I need that will help me through this time. So I just want to share that with you for whatever it's worth. One thing that's really important to note is that all herbs work different with all people. So always start small when you take herbs to see how your body responds. Also, if you're taking other herbs or if you're taking medications, it can, or you have certain chronic illnesses, none of this information may apply to you. So it's really important to do your own research or to work with a herbalist or doctor. But I have a lot of friends that I want to get this information out to because people are doing things that are not helpful. So I just want to bring some clarity. So I also want to really point out to start, one of my go-to books on this is by Stephen Buhner. It's Herbal Antivirals. I read this 6 years ago. I've been teaching classes on immunity at colleges, herbal immunity, folk herbal immunity. So I've been teaching at colleges and universities and holistic health centers. And in this one, he talks about viruses and the beauty of viruses, how it transfers DNA between species, which helps evolution. But he also talks about how this has been set up for a while. Our agricultural practices, many of our industrial practices have sort of set us up for some sort of pandemic. So I actually have a sense that this could be worse. And he also gives a lot of tools that have worked. And he has another book called Antibacterials. And several years ago, about 6 years ago, I had an antibiotic-resistant bacteria that had a mortality rate associated with it. And it was by using his book and his suggestions that I healed that. So plants do work. And one of the reasons herbs are so amazing is they have a whole bunch of antivirals, and Western medicine doesn't have a whole lot of antivirals. So I'm just passing this information along. And how we're going to do this is 4 parts. So the first part, I'm just going to give the basic information I've learned about coronavirus, COVID-19, just so we can be more grounded and more realistic about what to expect and aspects of the various pieces that relate to you and others. And then we're going to go into traditional immune builders. We'll talk about techniques that have been used over the years to build a healthy immune system. And there'll be some specifics that might influence some of the choices you make. Because if you don't want to go to necessarily the ones you've always gone to for this particular virus. The third part will look at traditional antivirals, the things used at early onset that have been used specifically for different variations of coronavirus in the past, including SARS. And then lastly, we'll go and look at the symptoms that come with this particular coronavirus and what herbs have traditionally been used for those symptoms. So that's what we're getting into in the next 20 minutes or so. So part 1, what is going on? I am not the ultimate authority. I'm not a doctor. I'm not part of the CDC. I'm not any part of a public health organization. I have been talking to doctors. I've been doing research. This all comes from them, passing it along. So a brief explanation about the coronavirus. And you might know all of this. If so, just fast forward a little bit. So the clinical name for this novel coronavirus is actually SARS-CoV-2, and it stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. There's been other coronaviruses. SARS is one of them. So the reason it's called novel is because it's a new strain. It's unfamiliar to our immune system, and there's not a vaccine for it yet. So there are different populations that are more vulnerable than others. Kids, there's been no mortality rate with kids at all. Those who are vulnerable are those who have compromised immune systems, especially in lung conditions. People 80 and over are the highest risk. The next is 70 over. and then it decreases precipitously from there. So they're saying 65 and above is the most vulnerable populations. So what happens if you get it? Basically, the immune system can get weakened, in which case you might develop pneumonia. That's happening in a lot of older populations. There's also this over-response of the immune system. So basically, one of the things that happens when you get sick is there's this inflammation response meant to protect you. And one of the things that happens with that is cytokines that help with that. And in some cases like this one, and in addition to, this was a similar thing that happened with the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, is the virus doesn't respond. And so the body thinks it needs to create more cytokines. And so there's this over-inflammation response, and it ends up accumulating in lung tissues. So it sort of up-regulates, and then the outcome is worse. And it is what can cause death as well. So those are the two things that are happening. And that cytokine response is why we have to be careful about which herbs we're choosing, because it can create an over-response. So why is it so contagious? People can become infected and can be anywhere between 2 and 14 days before they experience symptoms. So they're spreading it to others. Someone likened it to typhoid Mary. And how it spreads is through water droplets, through sneezing and coughing or touching mucous membranes and then touching something else or somebody else. So that's why the sort of fear around the hands and hugging right now. So why the social distancing? If you don't know about this, it's to not get together in groups of 50 or more. And it's really not that it'll stop the spread, though it's worked when there's been complete quarantine in places like China. The levels went from thousands a day to I think 7 a day when they did the lockdown. I don't think we can do that here. But what we're trying to do is, because about 80% of people, 60 to 80% of people will probably get it. Of those, 80 will be mild, but 20-ish% will need hospitalization, potentially. And there's only so many hospital beds. And because it's so contagious and moves so quickly, if all those people have to go to the hospital right at once, it'll be overwhelming, and really challenging choices will have to be made. And so if we don't get together, it flattens that curve so that as people get sick, it'll go like this instead of like this. And then there'll be enough hospital beds and people won't be overwhelmed and more people can get care. So that's sort of the social distancing piece. As I stated, about 60 to 80% of people will get sick, so you'll probably get it, but 80% of those will be mild, just simple flu-like symptoms. 14% will be critical, and 14% will be severe, and 5% will be critical, and half of those critical cases will survive. So I think it's important information to know. So, part 2. What do I do? The first thing is to make sure you have a healthy immune system. Whenever a flu goes around the world, some people get sick and some people don't. And why is that? It has to do with your soil, sort of if it allows pathogens to grow. And what determines that? Some of it's your birth and what your mother ate, and if you were breastfed. But there's things that we can do to help build our immunity. Healthy diet, getting outside, exercising, resting, relaxation, laughing, hanging out with friends. The things that build joy also build immunity. It's also important to have good barriers. That's why we're washing our hands. You may want to consider using a neti pot. Evidence that it may not do much, but years of history has shown that it might also do something. So why not, right? And then there's minerals you can take. Zinc and selenium. Let's see, I have them here. Zinc and selenium are very helpful for protecting from influenza. So get a good brand and just take what they say. It should be about 200 mcgs daily of selenium and 25 to 40 mgs of zinc. If you want to naturally do a good multi-mineral nettle, which you know is a weed, infusions give you all the minerals you need. So you would just take about a cup of plant material and you would put it in a large quart and pour hot water over it, cover it, and let it steep for at least 4 hours, preferably overnight, and then drink that every day. And it will give you all the minerals you need, and that's helpful for building strong immunity. Some vitamins that can help people have heard of is vitamin C. You can take it as a supplement if you want to take it naturally. Rose hips is really, really abundant in vitamin C. So this is a little rose hips tea I made. It's very tasty. Nice. It's a little astringent, but super sweet. It's also lovely for the heart. You can also, vitamin D, D3 is the one that is most helpful, easiest to assimilate. It is not vegan, so if you are vegan, you would have to take D2. You just take it as a prophylactic. If you start to get sick, you can take more, but you can take too much, so you only want to do that for a short period of time. So now moving on to more of the herbal world, adaptogens are herbs you may have heard of. They're becoming well known in the regular world. They help modulate your system in really amazing ways. They do so much, but we're going to particularly look at immunity. So one of the things they do is the secondary effect is they build immunity. And there's so many different kinds, from mushrooms to astragalus to eleuthero, which was known as Siberian ginseng, to panax ginseng, to rhodiola, many, many more. So I've been digging into it to try to see which ones are great for all immunity, which ones have any contraindication for autoimmunity, which is sort of what the cytokine response is like, which ones increase the cytokine response. I'm not entirely clear about all of them, but I did get clear about a couple, so I really want to recommend those. Cordyceps is by far recommended, especially by Stephen Buhner, for any sort of coronavirus. It's a mushroom that actually is sort of weird. It grows on insects, so it's an endoparasite. I often don't recommend it because it's not a super sustainable herb, but from what I've been reading, like, it is the herb for building immunity against against coronaviruses of the past. And I'm just educating you. I'm actually not recommending anything. I'm just educating. So it's considered a medicinal food. And when taken regularly, it stimulates the immune system in just the right way. It is also used for respiratory viral infections and lung infections. And this particular coronavirus has this affinity for the lungs. So you want to find herbs that have an affinity for protecting the lungs. So as a tonic, meaning what you would do daily, you would take 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon up to 3 times a day. If you do get sick, then you can increase that to 1/2 or 1 teaspoon 3 to 6 times a day. But you would do that for a short period of time. There are no really known side effects, but it may interact with some anti-diabetic medications, meaning you would need less of them. So please do your research around this. The other adaptogen that I've found and also recommended by Buhner is rhodiola, spelled R-H-O-D-I-L-A. It's a adaptogen with some antiviral properties. And in herbal clinical trials, it has had positive effects on pneumonia, which is one of the ways this particular coronavirus can show up. It's originally used in Russian folk medicine. How we would use it is 200 milligrams, or about 1/4 teaspoon per day. So definitely one not to use, and this isn't quite an adaptogen, but I want to talk about it here, is elderberry. So most people know about elderberry to build the immune system, but one of the things it does is it has that cytokine response, and because of this particular virus having that cytokine storm, we're avoiding it. Others I would normally recommend would be eleuthero, or also known as Siberian ginseng, or astragalus. But I'm not sure about that cytokine response. They may be fine. I just don't know enough right now. I'm talking to doctors and trying to get more information. So we're not ruling them out, but I'm not saying it's all good either. You can check that out. do some research. As I find out more, I'll make a list and put it out. The other thing that you can do to build your immunity is just protect yourself with barriers. You know, hand sanitizer, wiping things down. I went online, one of these hand sanitizers is like $50 right now. And then I read about recipes you could make using alcohol and aloe vera. I couldn't find alcohol or aloe vera. So I started researching, and I've known about this for a while. I don't know exactly how it works with coronavirus per se, so take it or leave it. But juniper berry has traditionally been used as an antiseptic and an antiviral by Native Americans and actually cultures across the world because it grows everywhere in every continent. So juniper berries you would boil in water. I take that water, add alcohol, and then I add my essential oils. You probably know of an essential oil called Thieves. It's made of 5 different essential oils: clove, cinnamon, eucalyptus, rosemary, and lemon. And it's called Thieves because during the bubonic plague or dengue fever, people would put it in masks and then go rob the dead. So you can try that too. Again, I don't know the science behind it, but I'm throwing everything I've got at this right now. So as far as brands go, Organic Mushroom is a great brand for the cordyceps. COS has all sorts of different adaptogens. They're a great brand. This bulk supplements, excuse the dirty package, bulk supplements, I use, sometimes I don't like the textures of there as much, but it's usually a little bit less expensive. So there you go, how to build a healthy immune system. So now, what happens if I do get sick? What do I need to do? So know that herbal medicine works different than Western medicine, and the best time to use these sedating, stimulating herbs, or a little bit more potent herbs, is the first second it feels like you're getting sick. Normally when we're like, I can just keep going. I'm tired. I don't know, I'm just feeling a little puny, like I don't know what's going on. That's when you start using antivirals to really make a difference. Most people think of echinacea, but again, what I've read, echinacea can increase that cytokine response, which would lead to that cytokine storm. So I'm not going to be using echinacea, but there's so many others that are antiviral. Like, it's amazing how many herbs have antiviral properties. Digging into the history of coronaviruses of the past and what has been used effectively through science and study, I'm going to just tell you about those. So one is Chinese skullcap. No, there's 2 different skullcaps. There's an American skullcap and there's a Chinese skullcap. So we're looking at the Chinese skullcap. The American skullcap, it's usually the leaf that's used. Chinese, it's typically the root, though there is some action in the leaf. It's been used around the world, from Tibetans to Native Americans, and it has a broad spectrum antiviral action that inhibits viral replication, it suppresses viral gene expression, it reduces RNA infection in cells, protects cell membranes from viral initiated cytokines. So it's a good one. If you get it as a tincture, it's 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon 3 times a day in acute situations, double that. I tend to like to make my own tinctures, but they take a little bit of time. It would take probably 4 weeks for your tincture to be ready. So you can also make it as a tea, and research the amount. Is probably a teaspoon or less of the actual herb to 8 ounces of water. But check that out. There are some side effects that can come with Chinese skullcap. Most of it's like gastric discomfort or diarrhea. This should not be used during pregnancy. And also if you're taking prescriptions, especially blood pressure lowering ones, or anything with diabetes or other herbs, do your research. Make sure that you can use it. So Chinese skullcap, if you're starting to get sick immediately upon the first thoughts of it. The next one is olive leaf. So this is our olive leaf. And it's from the olive tree. You know, the olive tree has been around for 5,000 years. It was originally from Africa. In 600 BC, it was brought to Greece. It's known as this peace offering plant. The mythology is that it was given to humans by the god of wisdom. And it's been known traditionally as a powerful defender against sickness and mitigating the spread of infectious diseases. Science has shown that it's really beneficial with viruses, especially influenza. And the prep for this is 2 teaspoons in 2 cups of water up to 3 times a day. And again, there are some precautions with it: high blood pressure, hypoglycemia, diabetes, and potentially pregnancy. Pregnancy, this is tough. A lot of these herbs are not used for pregnancy. The next one I'm adding to my formula, my tea formula, is Hyssops. Hyssop. And the ancients swore that it was a cure-all, antiviral, that warms and stimulates the lungs. So it has this affinity to the lungs. And it's also great for sore throats, which is one of the symptoms of this particular virus. So if you get a tincture, it's 1 dropperful 3 times a day. Otherwise, a teaspoon in 8 ounces of water 3 times a day. You want to be careful with this one. You can overdo this. It's kind of high up on the spectrum of plants. So high doses could cause seizure or vomiting, and it's also contraindicated with pregnancy. So those are the 3 herbs I'm putting in my antiviral formula. I'm throwing in some juniper berries as well. Berries are actually little cones. I didn't know if you knew that, but it's pretty cool. And if I even start to feel a little tired, my first sign is usually chapped lips. Everybody has their own. It's actually subtle enough now that I notice that I start to crave junk food. That's my first sign that I'm coming down with something. So that's when I would start taking this antiviral property. Tea. But right now, in addition to my adaptogens, I'm also drinking a lot of ginger. Ginger has been used across the world for treating a large range of viral infections, and it's been found effective in medical research. Now know that this is fresh ginger root, juiced. Dry ginger has a very different medicine, so don't be turned into dry ginger for this. It's fresh ginger root. It's actually a narrow spectrum antiviral, but it also has this focus for the respiratory system. So I'm just drinking a couple cups a day. The suggestion is to juice like a size of a carrot. I also don't know if you know this, but the more branchy the ginger root is, the spicier and more medicinal it is. So look for one with lots of branches. It can also be used as you start to get sick. You just drink more. And it has all sorts of great anti-symptom properties, for lack of a better word. So it will increase circulation, taking other herbs to the places they need to go. It has been shown that if you do start to get sick and you increase your amounts of that ginger that you're taking, that it can reduce the sick time to 3 days, and the episode can be more mild. And it also really helps with symptoms, which I said before. So you can drink 4 to 6 cups a day. Traditionally, you would drink it with honey and lime and cayenne at the beginning of a cold. Dr. Osborne, in an article, said that honey might increase cytokine response. So I'm just letting you know that. I don't know that more than what she said. There are some side effects with large doses of ginger. One is pregnancy. Another is gallstones. And it can sometimes cause bloat or gas or heartburn. If you do have a bacterial infection, it can increase the potency of antibiotics, which was actually one of the one I used for that antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So don't poo-poo ginger, man, it is powerful stuff. Another one that I've been starting to drink preventatively, which can also be used in the acute phase, is licorice, not the candy, but licorice root. It is a broad spectrum antiviral, and it strongly inhibits the cytokine cascade. So you can get these diglyceride like chews that's used usually for stomachs, but that's the constituent part you actually want for this particular case. They do that because you can definitely get too much licorice in your system. So what we would do here is combine a half to 1 teaspoon of powdered root with 8 ounces of water, simmer for 15 minutes, strain, and drink up to 3 cups a day. In acute situations, when you do start to get sick, you can drink a cup every 2 hours. But again, you only do that for a very short period of time. You should rarely use licorice alone in isolation for longer than 4 or 6 weeks, because the side effects can be severe. It can be edema, weak limbs, hypertension, and depletion of potassium. It also has a strong estrogen effect, so don't use with pregnancy. It's also contraindicated for people with hypertension or low testosterone levels, and with many other drugs. So make sure you do your research if you're on drugs or have conditions with licorice. It also can help with some sore throats of soothing that symptom. So it's another great one to have on hand. Another thing I read about this particular virus is that it affects the lymph system in a negative way. And you need the lymph system, especially when you're sick, to get all the stuff that's been going on, the sort of fight that's going on with your immune system and the virus. You need to get like what a friend of mine called the dead soldiers. You need to get the dead soldiers out. And the lymph helps to do that. And in this particular virus, I think it suppresses that, if I understand correctly. So there's a couple of herbs that can help. Red root is one of them. It stimulates the lymph system. It's also an anti-inflammatory, which is great for that cytokine response. So you would take a dropper full or two times a day. There's no side effects noted, but it is also contraindicated for pregnancy. And you should check if you're taking pharmaceuticals, especially any coagulants or anticoagulants. Red root, I went online and I had a hard time finding it. I don't know if the word's out about red root or something. So there's another plant you can use, but it's called a low dose botanical, which means it can be kind of dangerous if you take too much. Instead of a dropper full, you take a drop or two, like drop, and that's poke root. So if you want to find out more about that, get information. Contact me, contact Red Moon Herbs. Don't just start it without more information. Now we're moving into part 4. Say all right, you didn't catch it at the first stages, and now you have some real symptoms. And those symptoms are going to be fever, high fever, potentially dry cough, fatigue. You might cough up thick phlegm from the lungs, shortness of breath, which is a really important one to know about because that's one of the indications you should go seek medical treatment. Sore throat is common, headaches, chills. Some people also have nausea and vomiting. Several people also have bone or joint pain. So mild cases usually starts with a normal fever, may take a couple of days to get over the fever. You might have some respiratory symptoms, some aches and pains, and a dry cough. That's what, of the 60 to 80% of people who get it, that's what 80% of people have. If you get more moderate, you might also have all of those things, but your fever will go above 100, and you'll sort of have this feeling that you can't get out of bed. And then according to the World Health Organization and the China Joint Mission, 1 in 5 patients of that moderate will get worse. So that's about 14%. And they'll need oxygen, supplemental oxygen. And then from those, some will get more critical, and they'll have drop in blood pressure and several other things that can happen. And this progression could happen in several hours. So you want to make sure you're, from what I read, it could also take several days. So let's talk about some of those herbs. So fevers. Fevers have a purpose. I don't know if you know this, but most viruses can only live in a certain range of temperatures. And if it gets above that temperature, they die. So that's what fevers are trying to do. They're like, let's warm up the system and see if we can kill this thing off. So traditionally, with fevers, you sort of support fevers the first 24 to 48 hours to see if they'll kill it off. Now, if it gets over 101, you definitely want to bring it down. Or if it lasts more than that, you want to start bringing it down. So in the beginning, so one of the things that chills is your body trying to heat up and not being able to. So if you're chilled, you like heating herbs traditionally for other viruses have been helpful. You stay bundled up, you drink your ginger, you drink your rosemary, put some cayenne in it, keep that going. If your fever gets high and stays high, make sure you stay hydrated. That's traditionally what they do. And then traditionally they would give cooling herbs. And so that's yarrow, catnip, bone set, which is one of my favorite. It tastes terrible. It tastes like earwax. Not that I've ever tasted earwax. I've read about it, of course. And lemon balm. So what I'll do is I'll put whatever I have in hand, yarrow, catnip, bone set. And if I'm adding bone set, I'll add ginger so I can drink it. And you have to drink it hot. Bone set is a good antiviral, and it was used with a particular fever. It doesn't set bones. It was used with a fever that was known as bone break fever, and this was the herb that was helpful. So it's about 1 teaspoon of herb for 8 ounces of hot water. Steep for 15 minutes, and drink 4 to 6 ounces, so not even a full cup, 4 times a day. Contraindicated for pregnancy. And if you have allergies to chamomile and that whole family of flowers, then you might have allergies to this as well. So leave out the bone set. And sometimes it might cause nausea in some people. So that's the fever, traditionally used. Dry cough, tradition in herbalism. One of the go-tos is mullein. Mullein nourishes the lung, and because this virus is so affiliated to the lung, I think maybe we should all be drinking some mullein tea. It also cleanses the lymph, which is really great for what I was saying earlier. It liquefies phlegm, relaxes the bronchioles, reduces swelling, and relaxes spasms. You can just inhale it as a steam. So you would put mullein, and mulleine's really pretty. This is it cut up and sifted, but it's soft. It's this lovely soft plant. So you could put that, boil it in some water, and sort of breathe that in through the steam. That will help. You can also drink it as a tea, 2 teaspoons of dried leaf infused for 10 to 15 minutes, drinking 3 times a day. And from what I read, it doesn't have side effects. Another of my go-tos is elecampane. It's a root. It was used as a candy in London for many years. But one of the reasons I love it is it relaxes the spasms of the cough and then makes it productive, like that dry, hacking cough. It's like magic sometimes, where you're like hacking, and then you take some elecampane tincture, and a few minutes later you're like, oh, it's gone. The other, one thing about that, so it's 1 to 2 dropperfuls 3 times per day. I sometimes have used a little bit more, but feel your body on that one. The other one is traditionally used for cough is cherry bark, which is why most of our cough syrups are cherry flavored. It soothes the lungs. It's very sedating to the lungs. But it doesn't make it necessarily productive, and it doesn't deal with the underlying issues. So you can add it, but I would make sure you have these other things in there. I would actually just go with the other things, but that's me. I'm just providing information. The other symptom is a sore throat. So colloidal silver is helpful with that. And sage, your garden sage. Boil a fair amount in some water, and then you can either gargle with the water, or I put it in a handy dandy spray bottle and then use that. So it's great. One of the ways sage works is it reduces inflammation in the mucous membrane. Also contraindicated for pregnancy. So I apologize for all you pregnant women out there. So the last thing I want to talk about is inflammation. That's a really big piece of this. It's going to be important to manage your inflammation. Ginger is great at managing inflammation, especially in those massive doses. The other one that's great is turmeric. So turmeric looks a lot like ginger if you get it fresh. You could make up a paste of ginger and turmeric. You could boil the two. You can also get it as a supplement. Some people get it as curcumin, which is the constituent part. It's really hard to digest on its own. Often people add pepper to it because it makes it more bioavailable, meaning your body can assimilate it. And interestingly enough, pepper is also an antiviral. So you can just make a tea with a lot of ginger and a lot of turmeric root and some peppercorns and drink that for the next 6 weeks. Caution with diabetes, blood clotting medication, bleeding problems, hepatitis C's, gallbladder issues, and hormone-sensitive cancers. We need that like pretty picture like that they have at pharmaceutical commercials, as I say that. But again, with turmeric, if you have anything going on, if you're just not a pretty healthy person, make sure you research it. The last thing I want to say, is just I find this really fascinating. I'm not going to talk about them that much, but Buhner was talking about the SARS coronavirus. And two of the things he recommended, we live in the Southeast, this is brilliant. He recommends Japanese knotweed and kudzu root. And those things just grow in such abundance down here. And we think of them as these noxious weeds, but they have these apparently great properties for things like viruses. So let's see. Your go-tos, from what I understand, not recommendations, this is what I've read. They have suggested rhodiola and cordyceps, ginger and licorice for when things are starting to feel like a little funky. We're looking at hyssop and olive leaf and Chinese skullcap. And then for your symptoms, people are looking at, and mullein can do both. We're looking at sage and bone set and yarrow and turmeric and elecampane. That's where the mullein comes in. So anyway, there you are. There's the 30 minutes of herbal medicine education. Do with it what you will. I will try to put together a slideshow that's a little more professional, but it might take me a while, and I wanted to get this out there. So this is years and years and years of my life, probably a decade of my life learning about herbs, and weeks and weeks and weeks of research, at least a couple weeks of research. So I offer it for free. If you feel it's useful for you in your life, and you feel like, hey, I want to have some like sacred reciprocity around that, feel free to donate whatever is reasonable for you. My email is jldobrinska@gmail, jldobrinska@gmail.com. So you can PayPal me. You can also check out my website at wakingwomen.org. If you have questions, not that I necessarily will have all the answers, but I can guide you to potentially the books or resources that might. As always, check in with herbalist or doctor before doing any of this. And I hope you stay really healthy. And if you do get sick, it's super mild. And that you stay really well connected and have a lot of laughs in the weeks to come. That will keep you healthier than anything else. Thanks for listening. See you later.